Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Right, so it's that time again. I'm a bit late on this month one, but better late than never. So we have an updated tier list, and before we get any further, obviously the mandatory disclaimers. This is a list of mixture. This list is a mixture of my personal view of the game and current game relevance and trends. Please do not use this list as a point of argument, but more as a food for thought. Each summoner has different needs and preferences that far outweigh the importance of this list. Please rank champions that will help you get where you are trying to go, and do not blindly follow this or any other type of list. Second disclaimer is that this list only features champions that are out and available as 6-star champions. The ones that are not have their own mini list at the bottom here. There are still 4 champions like that in the game. Okay, so here's going to be an important thing again, especially when it comes to taking champions all the way up to rank 4. In my personal opinion, people need to realize that you don't need a rank 4 to do any content in the game aside from competing with other players. Rank 4s matter only as soon as other people get involved. This prestige race, that is alliance war, defense and offense, and that is battlegrounds. I think, be that Eternity of Pain, be that Abyss, be that story content, be that monthly content, everything else can be done with rank 2s and rank 3s and stuff like that. And therefore, in my personal opinion, again, rank up the champions that will help you improve or be better at the things that you care about. If you have been following my rank up videos, then you will know that I always pretty much take in consideration the viability for Alliance War and viability for Battlegrounds. And that is how I determine my rank ups. This, however, is a list of overall game relevance, kind of all of that mixed in. So there are no real changes. No, well, there is one change in top of the game list, but before I explain that, let me explain what each of these tiers mean. Top of the game basically means creme de la creme, the best of the best. The ones that are staples and virtually every game mode. There might be some game mode where a champion in particular isn't, amazing at. Like, for instance, Apocalypse isn't the greatest Battlegrounds champion, but Apocalypse is one of the best champions just overall across the game. Every other game mode he smashes. Meta stands for most effective tactics available, and every competitive game has its meta. That basically means the champions that vast majority of the people use in order to address the variety of problems. These are still kind of like your staple champions. When somebody asks you, should I rank that champion, without knowing much about them, if somebody asks me about anyone in these 2 tiers, I can quite confidently say, yeah, it's a good rank up. You can't really go wrong there. And then frequently useful is just that there are champions that might not be everybody's cup of tea, might not fit in as many game modes as the ones that are above, but champions that we do mention frequently when it comes to addressing specific problems, champions that we rely on, champions that you see often ranked for many people. But that's kind of like the difference. Like, if you play against somebody competitively in Battlegrounds, for instance, you will see vast majority of these champions ranked up. These ones already are going to be the ones that kind of stand out a little bit often, but not just about Battlegrounds in general. If you take a look at everybody's roster, most people will have some iteration of these ranked up, and then less of these. But still, these are champions that are perfectly capable of destroying many modes in the game. Useful, it's just as the name implies. These are rank ups that have their place, have their use. They might not necessarily carry your account or be your go-to option for any specific or particular problems, but these champions do have their place and time to shine as well. Occasionally useful are champions that, in my opinion, get that chance less often. But there might be some specific nodes or some specific circumstance where these champions are really, really good at, but it will be extremely rare situation when these are going to be your go-to options, unless Kabam tells you that you have to use like an Guardian or something. In general, these are the champions that can do important things in the game, but often how better alternatives too. Alternatives that do the same things that these champions do, just quicker, or easier, or just do more things overall. And then useless, borderline, unplayable, and insignificant champions are typically the champions that are just flat out either outdated or arrived into the contest as absolute duds. That's about it. There is some value to some of these. Like, you can get some benefit by ranking up some of these champions, but typically, if anybody asks my advice, should I rank up this champion, then I would say no. At the same time, remember, this is a game, and just as I said, if you do like a champion, rank him up. It doesn't matter where he lies on this list. Like I have said, for me personally, I think Carnage is one of the, if not the most fun champion to play and use in this game. And I don't think he's amazing. I think he's okay at times. I think he's very fun. But there are definitely many better champions in the game. I still like using him, and I took him to rank 2. And I have quite a lot of these champions, for instance, as well, at rank 3 for whatever reasons. That being said, let's discuss the changes. And the first and most important things, I suppose, are the new champions. Now, I took in both champions this time around to frequently useful tier. So we can talk about SpiderMan Supreme first. SpiderMan Supreme definitely has his weaknesses, which may or may not result in him basically being stuck there. For those of you who are unaware that despite all of the wow, amazing OMG damage and cheese videos, what now nobody really has talked when discussing Spider-Man is the fact that he is arguably the most fragile champion currently in the game. If you go to the stats page and take a look at baseline HP, you can notice that Spider-Man has 5th lowest HP in the game, and at the same time he has very bad block proficiency, and he has very bad physical resistance and very bad virtually everything else. All of those things combined basically mean that he's about as squishy as a champion can be. Now, obviously, it is not necessarily a deal breaker. Champion can still be amazing with those same qualities as long as he's exceptionally great. We'll see if that is the case. He is quite tricky to fight against, so he can be a defensive annoyance even with his tiny health pool. And at the same time, I do think that he will 100% have some offensive niche specialty places that he is automatically going to go to option. At the same time, I think that for a Mystic Champion, he does have a very good baseline damage that enables you to use him in generic fights as well. And all of that comes together in a very, very valuable kit for Alliance War, for Battlegrounds, and for general situations. We'll see exactly where he lies. I am open to demoting or promoting the guy as we see more of him throughout the contest. Obviously, as he's still very new, all of this is just kind of preliminary placement, largely based on hunches and feelings. And ultimately, I do think there is plenty of value in his kit. I do think there are plenty of weaknesses. And it's going to be interesting to see whether those weaknesses are going to be deal breakers, or he's going to overcome his squishiness and inability to nullify anything as a Mystic Champion and stuff like that, and still rise to the top. I genuinely think he's going to be quite a big part of the contest going forward, just because of how potentially overpowered he can be against unblockable buffs, and how great he could be in matchups where opponents have a passive power gain, which, by the way, also includes Mystic Dispersion. So in any matchup that is in Alliance War or Battlegrounds, you can actually kind of benefit from Mystic Dispersion Mastery, stealing it from the opponent, which would be very interesting to see. And the second champion to see is Spot, and Spot is in kind of similar situation where I can easily see Spot flying away and being one of the most popular champions released this year. I can see that happening because he does have access to a ton of damage on his level 2. He can maintain his phase for a really long time. Easy access to Infuriate, and obviously that mega block proficiency and many kind of awesome things. At the same time, I do think he is quite light on utility for what you would typically want to use a science champion for. Yes, he has access to Rapture and debuff immunity, but for instance, having access to a debuff immunity debuff, it's not quite as strong as it could be with many other champions. It's like, yeah, cool, you can get some willpower healing if you do that, but at the same time, throwing level 1 is kind of taking a detour from your high damage rotation. So in vast majority of the fights, you will not really want to do that, and you will only go for the debuff immunity if you have to. At the same time, we have plenty of champions in a game at this point already who are just buff immunity, who are just immune to buffs, like Titania, like Ant-Man, like SpiderMan 2099, Red Guardian, so on and so forth. And Quicksilver even has functionally a buff immunity, immunity from his own dexterity buff, which often is more than enough. So that's kind of the problem with Spot. And then past that point, as a science champion, he doesn't really have access to Petrify or Slow or any of the other signature science abilities. He basically phases and inflicts Rapture, which is kind of like the hallmark of, let's say, Tigra, and that's more or less all she needs. But Tigra also has a very unique playstyle that seems to work out. Whether Spot will seem to work out, we're gonna have to see. I hope he does, because Spot is one of my personal favorites. He looks really cool, and I want him to succeed. And I think with that straightforward rotation of just build up to level 2 and nuke things down, he can get up there. He can be very dominant in the game. But again, with lack of immunities and rest of the utility and rest of the special attacks being kind of useless, I'm not sure exactly where he's going to land. I hope he does well. Obviously, it's still very, very early days, so I will keep a very close eye to Spot. Now, discussing some promotions, I did promote Hulkling to the top of the game, because I think at this point it's quite evident that Hulkling is just an absolute monster in virtually every game mode. He's popular in Alliance War. You can easily use him in Alliance Quest. He's great for questing with easy access to great damage on his level 2. He's obviously a monster in Battlegrounds in majority of the metas, and there is, I think, no reason for him not to be alongside Hyperion, Galen, Hercules, and Cosmic Ghost Rider. I do think that we do have very strong Cosmic top 5 right now. And with that, I also think that arguably it could be stated that Cosmic could potentially be the best class in the game right now. But we'll see that when I do my end of the year rankings. But I put Hulkling at the top of the game. I did have a demotion as well, and I demoted Sorcerer Supreme to frequently useful. Because I think Sorcerer Supreme is taking a step back. She's still great. She's still frequently useful. But it is undeniable that she's not a standard go-to option for a ton of stuff for majority of the players. There will be plenty of people who love their Sorcerer Supreme, and so do I. I think she's an amazing champion. But in reality, you just don't really need or have to, or she isn't the go-to option, in my opinion. So that's kind of like the problem with Mystic class that I have at the moment in this tier list, and something that I need to sort out. Because I do fully believe that, again, Mystics have these champions kind of up top with Tiger, Dr. Doom, Diablo, and Black Widow. I think Rintra arguably could move to the top of the game as well, because Rintra is just beasting the contest and is a force to be reckoned with in every game mode that matters. But then, which one of these champions would fit that meta role? Because I'm not quite ready to give it to SpiderMan. And the rest of them, I do have quite a lot of critique and drawbacks for. I'm fully well aware that some of these will have to move up. But at the moment, I just can't decide which ones of these are the best or the most worthy of the meta status. But many of you will have noticed that Juggernaut has moved a tier up from being useful to frequently useful. And that is because there are a couple of interactions that kind of redeem Juggernaut. Obviously, after Juggernaut's buff, initially there was quite a lot of hype, then it kind of died down, and now it's picking back up again. Number one, because Juggernaut has crazy good damage output. He just does. It's impossible to deny. And number two is that the implied weaknesses can be relatively easily overcome, which is something that a lot of people didn't quite think far too. Like, even I myself have often commented how it's kind of silly that even a lot of cosmic champions, for instance, switch him off from the get-go, which shouldn't be the case. Like, if you bring in Juggernaut, for instance, against Cosmic Ghost Rider, you will start with an armor break debuff. But only thing you have to do is get to your level 1 and activate it, and then you're gonna recover all your abilities with the added benefit of having that armor break on you for the entire fight and that not mattering at all. So there are plenty of matchups where the fact that opponents disable your Gem of Sitarak initially might actually work out for you. Obviously, you still need to be very much aware of which matchups you can and cannot really bring Juggernaut in. But the more I have been playing with Juggernaut, the more I like the champion, and I want to keep seeing where it is going to end up, because I genuinely can see him even moving higher the more people kind of wake up to the fact that he's not as bad or useless as many people thought. And on top of that, Juggernaut is what Mystic Class needed, in a sense that he's just a brawler. You can bring him in against champions that have no buffs, and he's still going to have a really solid high damage output. And I love that. And Mystic Class needs more of that. So for now, Juggernaut is the one champion here that got actually promotion as well. I don't think there are any changes here for vast majority, except that I also moved Titania to frequently useful. I do think that she was somewhat underestimated coming in the contest together with infamous Iron Man. I think the more gameplay footage I see of Titania, the more I like her as a champion, to a point where she, at the moment, I really hope I pull Titania myself as soon as I open my new featured 6-star crystals, because I do think there's quite a lot there. I think it's fairly simple, but I think it's very effective. I think on Titania, reducing opponents' combat power rate on all of her hits, and then obviously accessing all the furies, everything else, plus being immune to buffs, is going to put in a huge role. And my suspicions got even further reaffirmed as I saw the changes to Alliance War, where we will have now specific, basically mystic lanes, where whatever you do, you're going to end up getting placebo buffs on you with the purpose of kind of like loading up opponents' Mystic Dispersion, Mystic Defenders, Mystic Dispersion, and that buff immunity, I think, is going to be playing bigger role in the future of the contest. Another promotion that I didn't mention, but I think people are, again, becoming acutely aware of, is Masaka. I think one of the coolest things about Masaka is just exactly how many crazy matchups he can do, and he does require quite a skilled player, but largely due to the efforts of top-tier Battlegrounds players, a lot of people now realize exactly how dangerous Masaka is in Battlegrounds, and we see him used more even in Alliance Wars and stuff like that. And kind of ironically enough, I think that release of Valkyrie helped push Masaka further, because when everybody was showcased and focusing on Valkyrie being that, then people just basically came out and said, it's like, Masaka does this better and more. And yes, Valkyrie has some abilities that Masaka doesn't, but Masaka overall is much more flexible in terms of which opponents he can and cannot go up against, and he has more matchups that he's great in compared to Valkyrie. And I think that kind of helped people see Masaka in a better light, and now he's just demonstrating crazy good results. Aside from that, I don't think there are any major changes. I did bump up Call Obsidian 1 tier and the Champion 1 tier. That is largely based on your comment feedback, so we can maybe stop all the Champion stands from crying, and Call Obsidian supporters can feel somewhat vindicated. I have heard you, and yes, Call Obsidian is a useful champion. The problem is that there are better alternatives, but fair enough. If Call Obsidian is your weapon of choice, he is a useful champion. And I think that is about it for now. Soon, next month, we are getting Rocket Raccoon buff, which is going to be very interesting to see. And there will obviously be more changes as always. As always, these lists are changing based on currently the things happening in the game. as you know, over time we do demote champions who are kind of getting slightly outdated or maybe forgotten. At the same time, there are always champions who are trying to move into the top tiers. So this is where we land currently. I will leave a link to this spreadsheet in the video description, and let me know what you guys think, what changes you would make to the list, and I'll catch you guys soon. See ya.
Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about